gonna start recording the class for the ones who are not here. Let me share the screen. And let's go right into the PowerPoint. And then I brought, as a big final, I brought a couple of videos that talk about the same topic. Remember, we're talking about the command economies, and we spoke about this Mr. This is Mr. Marx Engels, the father of the socialism and communism. And we spoke already that there is a difference between these two. Now, remember, the communism is a more extreme form of socialism, and the communism is like an authoritarian socialism. So that's the difference. One of the difference. The other one is that the communism is the only one who owns the resource, the sectors in the government. While in socialism, they only focus on the main resource, and the rest they just leave it to the private sector. That's basically the difference. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, today we need to complete this chapter, and let's see what I have for you guys. Central planners might also control the sector. Okay. And also they control also because they have some health programs. And also, as I told you, I think they have some education programs that they try to make that everybody has education and also a good health programs. Okay, now Karl Marx, economic revolutionary. Karl Marx grew up in the middle class comfort, sorry. Oh my God. Oh. In college, however, he became involved in radical politics. In time, his political activism led to his exile, se fue, from his homeland, Germany. He moved from country to country, eventually settling in London. Se radicó en Londres. En ese momento estaba la famosa revolución industrial. Y conoce a un amigo que su papá era dueño de una fábrica. Su amigo, este es su pasierazo, Friedrich Engels, the son of a factory owner. Through Engels, Marx became aware of the struggles of the working class, and he undertook a deep study of economics. He concluded that the Industrial Revolution had created a system of wage slavery. The factory owners make a profit by selling products at a higher price than the cost of labor on other resources. By keeping wages low, he could make ever greater profits. The whole industrial system, Marx reasoned, was based on this exploitation of workers. Vamos a explotar los trabajadores para que trabajen y tengamos más ganancias. To Marx, rising tension between workers and owners was inevitable. Development in economic history. Inevitable. So Marx, assisted by El Pasiero Engels, laid out this idea in the Communism Manifesto in 1848. Marx discussed this economy idea more fully in his enormous study, Das Kapital. This one, in 3 volúmenes, Das Kapital, in 3 volúmenes, which was published in 3 volumes between 1867 and 1894. No tenía nada que hacer. Because of the way the communism economies worked in practice and the eventual collapse of communism in the early 1990s, Marx's theory have fallen into disfavor. Ya casi nadie cree en el comunismo. Sin embargo, hay unos locos por ahí. Command economists today is that there are no example of pure communism economies today. The forces that have brought changes to traditional economy are also transforming the command economy. Transformó la economía tradicional y también transforma la economía command, the command economy. Only a few countries like North Korea, for example, still have economies, pero ¿qué va? Es un problema, es un desastre esa economía en North Korea. Y veamos por qué. North Korea, once the control of China and later Japan, Korea was split into North Korea and South Korea. Following World War II, North Korea came under communism control, mientras que acá ellos eran capitalism, they adopted capitalism, the South Korea. The government controlled every economic decision. For example, it diverted many of the country's resources to the military building up an army of more than million soldiers. Y la población solamente era 20 millones. O sea que iba a invertir más en los soldados. Imagínense, ¿y el pueblo qué? During that late 1990s and early 2004, food was so scarce that millions of North Koreans died from hunger and malnutrition. ¿Por qué? Porque se dedicaban todo al militarismo, los payasos de North Korea. Many North Koreans survived only because of food aid from other countries. Me acuerdo que en esa época se enviaban toneladas de comida para salvar a esa gente allá en North Korea. Yo creo que todavía no habían ni siquiera nacido. En los 90. Okay, failure to provide food and other important products was just one result of a flawed economic plan. ¿De quién? Del comunismo. For much of the 1990s, North Korea produced less and less each year, and its economy actually shrank. Está viendo cómo se iba hundiendo y se hundió hasta más bajo nivel en el 1997, 98, 97 diría yo. Sí. Y después comenzó a subir más o menos, subía y después bajó. Eso es un desastre. Un desastre, de acuerdo con esta gráfica. In communism, this is an example of how is a grocery store in the communism, and over here, how is a grocery store in a capitalism market system. Now, impact of command economies. In theory, command economies have some advantages. For example, it seeks to provide for everyone, even the sick and the old, who are no longer productive economically. O sea, que van a ayudar a la gente enferma y a la gente ya mayor. Que todos estén bien cuidaditos. In practice, however, disadvantages of command economies are abundantly clear. To begin with, central planners often have little understanding of local conditions. No saben nada sobre las condiciones locales. That's why their decisions are wrong. Y no piden opinión a nadie. Vamos a hacer esto porque lo hacemos y punto. Also, workers often have little motive to improve their productivity since they know they will be paid the same wage regardless of their output. And because there's no private property, there's no motivation for workers to use resources wisely. Perhaps the greatest failing of strict command system is the great suffering that people living under them endure. Carrying out central planning economic policies requires that individual rights, even the right to live, be subordinated to the needs of the states. Muy malo. Millions of people die in the effort to build huge collective farms in China and the Soviet Union. Millions more were imprisoned for exercising their political opinions and economic rights. Estimate suggests that the deeply flawed policy of command economies are responsible for more death than two world wars. Okay. Now remember, you have in the ISAE, you have all the assessment questions that you need to answer and write it in your notebook. And also remember the vocabulary. Okay. Now let's stop right here and let's watch the video that I brought as a conclusion of this chapter that was about the command economy. Now, next week, remember, also over here in platform, you have information about mind map in case you don't know how to make mind map. Okay, guys? Here. Yeah, let's begin with this one. Remember, next week, we're going to enter, then after the forum, the second class, then we're going to enter into now the third one, the third system, market economics. Okay? Now let's finish this with the economic and socialism, the difference between them.
But in the history of the modern world, there has never been a communist country. While a number of countries have described themselves as communist, for example, China and North Korea, by definition, there has never been a true communist country. So what exactly is communism and how does it relate to socialism? Well, it may be easier to explain what the two have in common. Both ideologies originate from a desire to limit worker exploitation and lower or eliminate the influence of economic classes in society. There are dozens of variations on both communism and socialism based on the different ways these ideologies are implemented in different countries. There's Stalinism, Leninism, Trotskyism, Maoism, and others which are essentially all versions of Marxism, coupled with various styles of revolution. Karl Marx was an economist and philosopher who co-wrote the Communist Manifesto, among other foundational books on communism. In short, his theories centered around the idea that as Europe transitioned from centralized monarchies to quasi-democratic capitalist economies, workers were being exploited by those who owned the means of production. So if you work in a factory or on a farm, as many at the time did, whoever owns the factory or farm is getting more out of the worker than they're putting in. This creates an inherent inequality, giving the owners, who Marx called the bourgeoisie, power over the workers, called the proletariat. In Marxism, to fix this inequality, society must shift towards a model where the proletariat hold this power instead, by collectively controlling the means of production. That's where socialism and communism come into play. According to Marx, socialism is a precursor to communism and the next logical step after capitalism. In socialism, a democratic state controls the means of production, rather than having private companies hold ownership. Instead of competing with each other as in a capitalist society, socialism has workers contribute as much as they can to the greater good, and then they all share equally in that good. Variations of this idea are already popular within capitalist societies in the form of universal healthcare or social services like fire departments and schools funded by taxes. While the use of these services is unequal, everyone is equally responsible for contributing to them based on their ability or level of income. So that's socialism. But once the state controls all the means of production, the next step is total collective ownership, not just of production, but all aspects of society and economy, including private property. The intention of abolishing private property is a classless, moneyless, and stateless society, where everyone works towards the same collective goal of being healthy, happy, and free. Everybody does what they can to contribute and takes only what they need in return. As I said before, there are no true communist countries, and there never have been. Every so-called communist country is actually a socialist country, with the state controlling employment and economy to some degree. Even the widely referred to Communist Russia was actually called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. In short, socialism and communism are not altogether different. Rather, most schools of economics consider socialism to be a precursor to communism once the state has enough control over society and economy. But this total control is a major reason that socialist countries struggle to reach this ideal. Corruption is rampant in countries like the former USSR, Venezuela, Vietnam, and North Korea, largely due to people in power abusing that power instead of using it to help the society they control, and refusing to give up that power to the people. Nonetheless, socialist ideals have seen incredible success when paired with capitalism in countries like Sweden and Canada. The human hurdle of overcoming power and greed in government is the biggest reason we've never seen a true communist country. So, which countries have been labeled communist, and how do they actually live up to their reputations? Find out.
Okay, now this is the last video for you, and I hope with this you have a big picture of this topic, guys. Okay.
Sure, can I ask you something?
Hold on. Don't worry. Let me. And then
diplomatic relations between Cuba and the United States improve. We wanted to look at the political philosophy behind the long embargoed nation. Cuba is one of the last communist dictatorships left in the world, and since extreme anti-communist sentiments in the mid-20th century, the philosophy has been a regular fixture in political discussions. So we wanted to know, what exactly is communism? Well, there are a number of overlapping philosophies and socioeconomic systems that can be described as communist in nature. But in the most basic sense, communism is when all manufacturing or means of production are equally owned by all the members of a state. The intended result is to eliminate the capitalist-inspired class system where one class does all the work and the other gets all the money. Although similar ideas have existed both naturally and intentionally since the dawn of time, the most common form of communism comes from the work of German philosophers Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, in what is today known as Marxism. In particular, Marxism is focused on the exploitation of the worker. It's based on the idea that any profit generated by the worker but instead goes to the business owner is a form of inequality and should be abolished. In recent history, several countries, including the USSR, China, Vietnam, and Cuba, have attempted to institute their own versions of communism. However, all can be said to be predominantly socialist and not communist. The biggest difference between the two is that socialism says that all workers should get an equal share in profit and property, while communism says that there shouldn't be money or ownership in general, and everyone should get as much as they need and work as much as they can. Unfortunately, attempts to achieve this political philosophy have led to lower standards of living, government corruption, and in the case of the USSR, total collapse and failure. A number of reasons have been put forth as to why communism hasn't worked out historically, but the strongest criticism of the philosophy is that communism removes the incentive for people to work harder than they absolutely have to. It also leads to resentment of those who work less hard but receive the same. In general, communism is described as being great in theory while disastrous in practice. And the state of the world seems to agree with that assessment. If you'd like to learn more about political theory, make sure you check out these videos on libertarianism and anarchy.
Definitely, there's a lot of information on the internet, guys. So if you wanna expand your knowledge, please spend time on YouTube.